Hello again, this is Tim Lloyd from GMAT.cz. Today I'm going to run through the basic decision-making process and answer choice elimination process for data sufficiency questions on GMAT. Now GMAT has 15 typically of these questions from 37. Now that's a large proportion, okay? And the good thing is the answer choices are always the same. Okay, so as you saw, answer choice A, answer choice B, they both focus on either of the additional statements alone. Answer choice C talks about involving both of them, as does answer choice E. And then answer choice D again focuses on each statement being sufficient alone. Okay, now all this is going to become much clearer as we go through this detailed step-by-step process. There are 5 or 6 steps to this process, and you'll see very quickly how easy they are to remember. Now, one thing we recommend that you do is you do not experiment, you do not take shortcuts, and you do not try to save time by rushing through these steps, okay? It will become automatic that you'll be getting much quicker at these decisions as you become stronger at math, because yes, you have to go back to high school level math. There's no calculator, so remember GMAT is a reasoning test, especially in data sufficiency. Okay, so now I'm going to go step by step. I advise you to pause the video, make a note of these steps, make flashcards if you find that it helps. A lot of our students do. Okay, and then we're going to apply it to a fairly basic question, and as I've said before, we then recommend that you go ahead, try some, and watch some of our free videos. Okay, so here we go. Okay, step 1 is the fundamental step when approaching data sufficiency questions. Analyze the question stem. Okay, it's the step that people most often rush because they think it is not important, or they think they don't have enough time, that they need to focus more on the additional information given in the statements, or for whatever reason they panic or they don't give enough respect to the question stem. So as we always emphasize repeatedly to our students, carefully analyze the question stem, which means firstly read through, establish the variables. Often the variables will be explicitly mentioned, other times you'll need to introduce variables to take control of the question. Second, establish the limits of those variables. Is it possible that they're positive, negative, both, can be zero, can be fractions, must be integers, prime numbers, etc. Think about that, take your time before you even consider the additional statements. Step 2 is probably the most simple. You may even decide to do this as step 1. Is it a yes/no question or a value question? Data sufficiency has these 2 types. The reason this is vital to establish is because sufficiency is slightly different if it's a yes/no question compared to if it's a value question. For example, for a value question, sufficiency means you can establish only one value. If there's more than one possible values, it's not sufficient. For a yes/no question, it must either be always yes or always no. Okay, this will become much clearer as we do some example questions and as you do more practice. Okay, so step 2, is it a yes/no or is it a value question? Right, now step 3 is where we start analyzing the additional information. We start by only analyzing in step 3 the information provided from the question stem, which we've already established, and the additional information provided in additional statement 1. Okay, I sometimes refer to this as clue 1, but really it should be considered statement 1. We absolutely must not consider at this point, and we must ignore the information provided in statement 2. All right, this becomes much clearer as you do more practice. You say to yourself, all right, what is included in statement 1 I'm interested in? Statement 2 doesn't exist for me at this point. We're now going to start analysing whether we should look at answer choices A, B, C, D or E, and as I said before, we're going to consider this as the AD split or the BCE split. In other words, the direction at this point, if we have sufficient information in the first clue, we call it the path of AD. If we do not have sufficient in the first clue or statement, then we consider the path of BCE. Now this is very important. Maybe pause the video now and reread what those answer choices are. Okay, good. So now that we are focusing on the first clue, let's talk about a little bit about both paths, but with regard to sufficiency for yes/no questions, okay, compared to value questions. Sufficiency is what data sufficiency is all about. We're saying that the first statement is sufficient to answer the question. That's the AD, but what if that is a yes/no question? Well, be very careful not to confuse yourself here, because it happens to the best of us in the heat of battle, so to speak. If I consider, well, the question is yes/no, so can I only answer yes? Well, good, that means no confusion, yes. But what if it's only no? Well, that is also sufficient, so I would also get sufficiency yes, even though I'm getting yes/no answer no. So just think about that for a second. The only time we get sufficiency no for a yes/no question is when we get both a yes to the answer to answer the question and a no to answer the question. So repeat that if you need to. Having now established which path we're going to go down in this question, okay, we now do step 4, and as you may imagine, step 4 is kind of the opposite of step 3. Now we use the information from the question stem and information only from statement 2. Okay, we ignore everything we just learned from statement 1. Sometimes I recommend that you put your finger over the computer screen literally so you can't read the first statement. It's vital that you do that. If you need to repeat that, rewatch that part of the video. We're now on the AD path and we're looking at the statement 2 by itself. If we get sufficient, in other words, enough information to answer the question stem, the answer is D. Okay, if we're down the AD path. If the second is not sufficient by itself, in other words, we got yes for the first statement, no for the second statement, the answer is A. But what if the first statement was not sufficient and we're down the BCE path? Well, again, we ignore the first statement, we're focusing on the second statement. If the second statement is sufficient, the answer now is B. So we consider B as a no yes. In other words, no, the first statement wasn't sufficient, the second statement was. If we get no, no, in other words, neither statement is sufficient by themselves, okay, by itself, then the answer choice will be the CE option. But the only time we care about the CE option is if we haven't established A, B, or D as possible answer choices. In other words, we only put the two statements together when neither statement is sufficient by itself. So the final step in some questions, a lot of questions you won't need to do this step in data sufficiency, is to combine all the information. The question stem, statement 1, statement 2, put it all together. If you are able to answer the question, if you have sufficient information, sufficient data to answer the question, your final decision is a yes. In other words, you've got a no for statement 1 by itself, a no for statement 2 by itself. You put everything together like a good test taker, and you then get a yes, which happens fairly often, by the way. The answer choice is C. Contrarily, if by putting everything together and analyzing all the possible details you still get a no, okay, then the answer choice is E. So E comes up also fairly often. You cannot assume there is a certain ratio of one over the other. You have to follow these steps. There we go. Thank you for your attention. Yes, you need patience to get used to this system. Trust me, there's no holistic approach to this type of question. Follow steps once you become more confident, you might spot some shortcuts, but it really isn't worth it in the test. When we write questions, depending on even a basic question, there are so many traps that we can actually put into the process of data sufficiency with regard to the statements and the additional information on the question stem itself. So please go on to part 2 of this video and we'll look at some worked examples. Thank you. Goodbye.